Welcome to the debate. Imagine paying Broadway prices to see, a world-renowned musical.
Right, like you bought the premium front row seats.
Exactly. But when the curtains finally part, you realize the lead actor, the superstar you specifically paid to see, is taking the night off.
And not because they have a structural injury or anything.
Right, not because they are sick. They are sitting out simply because the schedule is too demanding, and the director decided they need to rest for tomorrow's matinee.
Which means you have just paid full premium price for the understudy.
That is the exact reality of professional basketball today. We are looking at a system at war with itself.
It really is.
Today, we are asking a multi-billion-dollar question. Is the proposed shift from the traditional 82-game schedule to a condensed 60-game season a necessary evolution to save the sport, or is it financial suicide?
Spoiler alert, it's financial suicide.
Well, I am taking the position that killing the 82-game season and dropping it to 60 is the only way to maximize player health, elevate the overall quality of play, and ensure that every single time the ball is tipped, it actually matters.
And I am arguing that doing so would absolutely bankrupt the sport. You are looking at this from, a pure film room perspective, which sounds beautiful in theory, but completely ignores the front office reality.
I completely disagree with the bankruptcy claim, but let's...
Okay.
This league is a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem built entirely on volume. The 82-game schedule is not just some random tradition, it is carefully constructed inventory. Cutting 22 games would be financially destructive to absolutely everyone involved, from the billionaire owners right down to the local parking attendants. Let's put our core positions on the table before we dig into the mechanisms of how this works. Because when you evaluate the modern game from the film room, the evidence is overwhelming. The 82-game season physically breaks human beings.
They are elite athletes.
They are. We're taking the most highly tuned athletes on Earth, demanding they cross multiple time zones weekly, and asking them to play grueling back-to-back games on hardwood floors. The physiological toll is immense.
Sure, the schedule is tough.
It's more than tough. It actively dilutes the product we are sold. A 60-game season is the only way to guarantee healthier players. It creates a vastly superior, highly competitive product. Right now, we all know a random Tuesday night game in February is often functionally meaningless.
I wouldn't say meaningless, but I hear your point.
Condense the season, and you eliminate the profound fatigue that leads to sloppy play. You eliminate the plague of stars setting out. And you give the fans the peak athletic performance they are paying for.
But you are treating professional sports leagues as if they exist in a vacuum where only the quality of the jump shot matters.
Because that is the product.
No. Once you step into the front office, you have to acknowledge that this is an enormous economic machine. Every single game represents a complex web of revenue streams: ticket sales, luxury suite leases, parking fees, concession stand revenue.
Right, I know the spreadsheet.
Let me finish. Local broadcast advertising, national television slots, corporate sponsorship activations. You cannot simply chop 22 games off the schedule and pretend you are just refining a sport.
But if the sport itself is better?
You are stripping hundreds of millions of dollars out of the ecosystem before we even begin to factor in long-term television deals. Reducing the season to 60 games is a catastrophic financial hit that the league's economic infrastructure simply cannot absorb.
Well, if we're going to examine the infrastructure, let's start with the foundation of it all, the physical reality of the athletes on the court. Wait,
Before we even get to the court, let's talk about the balance sheet. Because if you drop to 60 games, what happens to those 11 lost home dates for every single team?
We adjust.
Who replaces 30 nights of zero ticket sales across the league? How do you plug the massive deficit in lost parking, concessions, and suite leases that corporate sponsors have already paid for?
Okay, you are starting with the spreadsheet, but you are entirely ignoring the biological mechanism that generates those numbers in the first place.
The biology doesn't pay the bills.
Now, if you're listening to this, you're probably rolling your eyes thinking, oh, these guys make $40 million a year, they can play tired. But here is the biological reality of what we're asking them to do. You land at 3 a.m. in Milwaukee after playing 35 intense minutes in Chicago.
Classic Midwest back-to-back.
Exactly. Your circadian rhythm is completely destroyed. The lactic acid hasn't flushed from your legs. Your cortisol levels are spiking from the travel stress. The next night, your fast-twitch muscle fibers are firing a fraction of a second slower than normal.
Which happens at any physical job.
But that micro delay is exactly when an ACL tears or an Achilles ruptures. The physical toll of 82 games guarantees soft tissue failure. When the stars are on the bench in street clothes because their biometrics put them in the red zone for injury risk, the product fails.
I'm not denying the injury risk.
If the product on the floor is fundamentally compromised, those revenue streams you are desperately defending will dry up anyway because consumers will stop buying tickets to watch exhausted understudies.
I understand the biomechanics, and obviously no one wants to see superstars injured. But you are missing a massive piece of the puzzle here. That grueling volume of games is literally what pays for the modern sports science you're quoting.
Oh, come on. They don't need 82 games to afford an ice bath.
It's way more than an ice bath. The league doesn't generate revenue simply by existing. It generates it by opening the arena doors 41 times a year per team. Every one of those 11 home games you want to cut per franchise is a night of guaranteed revenue completely vanished.
Yes, but the remaining games become more valuable.
Mathematically, it doesn't scale. Multiply that across 30 teams, you are talking about 330 total games wiped from the calendar. That specific volume of inventory is exactly what funds the state-of-the-art hyperbaric chambers, the private chartered jets that reduce travel fatigue, the armies of physical therapists, and the massive salaries.
So they play more games just to recover from playing more games.
The financial infrastructure of the recovery you want relies on the volume you are trying to cut. It's that simple.
But that logic creates a self-defeating cycle. We are playing 82 games to fund the physical therapy required to survive 82 games. It treats the sport like a bulk commodity rather than a premium experience.
Because live entertainment is a volume business.
Why wouldn't the sports league want to protect its absolute most vital assets, meaning the players, to ensure every single game is a high-stakes premium event? Think about it. When a luxury brand floods the market with lower-quality items to increase their sales volume, they inevitably lose their prestige.
Right.
The value of the brand drops. By protecting the athletes and reducing the supply of games, you elevate the exclusivity and the quality of the product.
That is a great theory. But professional sports leagues are not luxury handbag companies. They are live content providers. And you can't just talk about empty seats in an arena because the real money isn't walking through the turnstiles, it's coming through the fiber optic cables.
The television deals.
Exactly. This brings us right into the macro financial structures, the broadcast contracts. Networks and regional sports partners are not buying a Michelin star meal. They are buying electricity to keep the lights on for 6 months.
They are buying the rights to air games.
Yes, and they need the sheer voltage of 82 games to do it. Broadcasters don't just pay for premium exclusivity, they pay for consistent programming to fill their time slots, sell regular advertisements, and justify billion-dollar rights fees.
But surely, high-stakes, elite-quality programming drives significantly higher ratings than mid-season filler?
Not in the aggregate, and the aggregate is what media conglomerates care about. A regional sports network needs to sell local advertisements for a Tuesday night, a Thursday night, and a Sunday afternoon for half the year.
I get that, but
They use the massive volume of an 82-game schedule to justify their monthly subscription fees to cable providers and their ad rates to local sponsors. If you suddenly cut to 60 games, you shatter these billion-dollar contracts.
they would just renegotiate for higher per-game rates.
The broadcasters are going to say, look, we agreed to pay you for 82 nights of content. If you only deliver 60, we are paying you drastically less. It triggers a catastrophic renegotiation that results in a colossal loss of broadcast revenue. The entire media model is predicated on bulk inventory, not artificial scarcity.
See, you assume that cutting games means cutting revenue perfectly proportionally, but that completely ignores the elasticity of demand. Let's examine what artificial scarcity actually does to a broadcast property.
I'm all ears.
If a team only plays 60 games, the mathematics of the standings change overnight. Every single game has a direct, profound impact on playoff seeding. That random midweek game in February suddenly becomes a critical must-win scenario.
It's still a midweek game in February, though.
But ratings for that individual game would skyrocket because the stakes are exponentially higher. Broadcasters could shift their model from selling bulk programming to selling must-watch event television. By condensing the schedule, national TV slots become far more competitive, and the advertising rates networks can charge per game would climb massively.
Okay, but even if we accept the premise that the per-game value increases, which is a big if, by the way,
I think it's a certainty.
even if it is, It mathematically cannot bridge the gap of losing 330 total games of inventory across the league. You simply cannot raise the ad rates high enough on 60 games to cover the absolute loss of the 22 games you threw away.
The networks would adapt.
And we need to look at who actually absorbs that loss. That macro-level television money doesn't just sit in an owner's vault, it trickles down.
Let's follow that money then, because when we look at the players, they are the ones leading the charge here. They are the ones aggressively pushing for better working conditions, fewer back-to-backs, and more recovery time.
Sure, they want more rest.
Right, they are feeling the physical brunt of this relentless system and actively demanding a change.
Yes, they are pushing for rest, but they are ignoring the fatal flaw in their own economic logic, and it comes down to how they are actually paid. The salary cap isn't just a magical number pulled out of thin air.
It's tied to revenue.
Exactly. It is calculated by a very specific mechanism, basketball-related income, or BRI. It is a revenue-sharing model, fundamentally an even 50-50 split between the owners and the players' union.
Everyone knows that.
But do they think about the consequence? If total league revenue drops because there are fewer games, less broadcast inventory, and 330 fewer nights of ticket sales, the BRI pie shrinks instantly.
Temporarily, maybe.
No, immediately and permanently. And when the pie shrinks, the salary cap drops directly with it. That means every single player contract shrinks. The very players demanding rest and a 60-game season would be taking roughly a 20% pay cut to get it.
They might accept that.
Are the superstars really willing to give up $10 million a year for fewer games? Are the mid-level role players willing to lose millions over their careers? I highly doubt it.
It is a profound trade-off, I'll admit that. But a longer career, sustained by vastly better physical health, might yield higher lifetime earnings even with the lower annual cap figure.
That's a huge gamble for a guy on a 3-year deal.
But you avoid the catastrophic career-ending injuries that this current schedule practically guarantees. And frankly, we must also consider the basic humanity of their working conditions.
Okay, if we are going to talk about working conditions, we have to look past the millionaire athletes and talk about the unseen workforce. Let's trace the life cycle of a Tuesday night game. When you drop from 41 home games to 30, it isn't just a point guard taking a slight pay cut.
Well, they aren't the only ones affected.
Far from it. A fan pays $40 for parking. They buy a $15 beer from a vendor who makes an hourly wage plus tips. They hit the local restaurant before tip-off, keeping the waitstaff busy.
I understand the local economy argument.
Think about the arena security guards, the ticket takers, the cleaning crews. Entire pockets of these cities rely on the foot traffic and the economic engine of those 41 home dates. Dropping 11 nights of guaranteed income from their calendar is effectively a 25% pay cut for them.
It's painful, yes.
It destroys their livelihoods. You are fundamentally gutting the income streams for thousands of blue-collar workers who rely on that specific volume of nights.
Look, I hear the gravity of that. The local economic impact is incredibly real. But I have to push back on the morality of that exact ecosystem. Are we really saying we need to structurally degrade human tendons just to keep the sports bar across the street open?
That's a dramatic way to frame it.
But it's true. We are essentially admitting that the entire economic system relies on the physical destruction of the primary laborers. If an industry requires its athletes to push themselves to the point of physiological failure just to maintain the surrounding vendors, perhaps that industry's economic model is fundamentally flawed and deeply needs to be right-sized.
You call it propping up local business on broken bodies, but I look at it as a symbiotic economic engine that employs tens of thousands of people nationwide. The athletes are compensated hundreds of millions of dollars precisely to perform that labor. It is the core agreement of the business.
And an agreement designed by the owners.
And the underlying philosophy of ownership, the architects who actually built this system, is entirely anchored in this reality.
Which brings us to the overarching philosophy of ownership. And this is where the logic truly falls apart for me.
How so?
The owners consistently prioritize short-term volume over the long-term greatness and sustainability of their own sport. By demanding 82 games, they are explicitly choosing to maximize this quarter's ticket sales at the direct expense of the brand's long-term legacy.
They're running a business.
They are intentionally diluting their own product. A legendary game, a historic performance that people remember for decades. These things require athletes operating at 100%. When owners force an exhausted, compromised product onto the floor night after night, they aren't treating basketball like an art or a competition. They are treating it like a factory assembly line.
Look at historical precedent, though. Leagues never shrink, they only expand.
Unchecked growth isn't always good.
They add expansion teams, they create new in-season tournaments, they add wildcard rounds to the playoffs. Look at the NFL. They didn't look at the devastating physical toll of professional football and decide to shorten the season to protect the players. They added a 17th game.
Which is crazy to me.
Because in modern sports, more inventory wins. The owners prioritize volume because volume is exactly what the market rewards. If the market truly punished them for the 82-game season, if fans actually stopped buying tickets because a star was resting, they would change the model tomorrow.
Fans complain about it constantly.
But fans keep buying, networks keep paying billions, and the valuation of these franchises continues to skyrocket into the stratosphere.
The NFL comparison actually proves my point perfectly. The NFL plays 17 regular season games. Every single game is a massive, high-stakes event.
Right, it's a completely different sport.
Exactly. The scarcity of the product is exactly what makes it a cultural juggernaut. Professional basketball is doing the exact opposite. By offering 82 games, they are ensuring that the vast majority of their inventory is culturally irrelevant until the playoffs begin in April.
Irrelevant is a strong word.
But it's true. The inherent contradiction here is staggering. If owners truly valued the product they were selling, they would realize that watering down the regular season with exhausted players ultimately harms the brand's long-term value. You cannot claim to sell the greatest basketball in the world if your schedule mathematically prevents the players from actually playing it.
But the brand's long-term value isn't some nebulous philosophical concept measured by the beauty of the game. It is calculated in media rights deals, corporate sponsorships, and franchise sale prices. All of those metrics are at absolute all-time highs right now under the 82-game model.
Financial highs don't equate to product quality.
You say it harms the brands, but the financial realities show the exact opposite. The front office knows that while a 60-game season might make perfect sense on a whiteboard in the film room, in the real world, it runs into an immovable wall of economics. Until the business side of basketball is willing to sacrifice massive, guaranteed volume for theoretical quality, dropping to 60 games is a complete non-starter.
Let's draw this toward a conclusion. When we look at the totality of our discussion today, my position remains that protecting the physical integrity of the athletes through a 60-game season is the only way to guarantee a premium, meaningful product.
And it's a fair position, purely from a sports perspective.
Right. The film room perspective shows us the physiological reality. Human beings, no matter how highly trained or well-compensated, simply cannot deliver peak performance under the crushing volume of the current schedule. Evolving to 60 games is a painful but necessary step to save the sport from its own excess, eliminating the need for load management and ensuring that every single time the ball is tipped, it truly matters to the players and the fans.
And my position is that you cannot decouple the purity of the sport from the reality of the business. The entire infrastructure from billion-dollar regional television networks down to the local parking attendants and the player's own salary cap relies mathematically on the 82-game volume model.
It's all connected.
Deeply connected. Shifting to 60 games isn't just tweaking a schedule for the sake of healthy knees. It is an active destruction of inventory that would trigger a massive, unavoidable financial contraction across every single level of the sport.
I think where we find convergence today is the shared acknowledgement that in a vacuum, a 60-game season would absolutely create a better, healthier, more competitive on-court product. I mean, the actual basketball itself would drastically improve.
I agree with that completely. Less fatigue equals better performance. It's just basic biology. But where we diverge deeply is whether the massive financial sacrifice required to achieve that peak performance makes the evolution impossible in the real world. The economics simply do not allow for that vacuum to exist.
The tension between film room ideals and front office economics is truly a defining conflict in modern sports. It requires much deeper exploration, as the physical limits of athletes continue to clash with the endless financial ambitions of leagues.
Well said.
It leaves us to decide whether quality should ever be allowed to outweigh volume. Think back to that Broadway stage we started with. We have to ask ourselves, are we paying to see the absolute best performance possible, or are we just paying to keep the theater lights on?